Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining Powerful Women's Diversity Pays session. Please do grab some lunch and come and take a seat at the table, but we are going to start. So my name is Georgina Worrell. I'm the head of Powerful Women, and for those of you who don't know, Powerful Women is a professional initiative working for a gender-balanced, diverse and inclusive energy sector, and our target is that by 2030, women will be in at least 40% of middle management and leadership roles. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Powerful Women, you can subscribe to our newsletter, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We don't charge a membership fee to be part of Powerful Women, so please do come and support us. I'm delighted to be joined by our panellists today, who are going to give us a really insightful conversation about why diversity pays. So I'm going to pass over to the moderator, Monica Collins.
Thank you, Georgina. So hopefully you can hear us all at the back of the room. So we're leaning over our speakers. Please do continue to get your lunches and then come and sit down. We'll carry on anyway. So my name is Monica Collings. I'm former Chief Executive of So Energy, and I now operate in a portfolio capacity, and I'm a chairwoman of Swarm Energy, amongst a number of other organisations that I work with. During my tenure as Chief Exec at So Energy, I was the only female Chief Executive leading a domestic energy retailer. So I am well used to being the only woman in the room, far more common for me at that point than I would have liked. And during that time, I have been in a number of situations where I've been ignored, I've been marginalised, I've been propositioned inappropriately. And if those kinds of things can happen to me as a chief executive, then I'm certain that they continue to happen across the sector. And why I'm passionate about this panel and the conversation we're going to be having is I genuinely do believe that diversity pays. We will have a conversation about why that is the case, and why it's actually about the environments that we create that will help us to overcome some of the challenges and experiences that I've certainly experienced in my time in energy. So my panellists will introduce themselves, but we will kick off with each one of them saying who they are and answering the question, why diversity matters, what diversity means to them. So I'm going to start with Umar, please.
Right, afternoon everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Where's the energy in this room? Right, afternoon everyone. Can you all hear me? Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Umar Kaniya. I am a media lead for an organisation called Dope Black Dads. So effectively, Dope Black Dads is an organisation that was set up about 5 years ago, looking to challenge the narrative around black fathers, black fatherhood, and kind of creating a digital safe space for black men to get together and be able to kind of discuss all things parenting and what it means to be a father in the 21st century, and especially what it means to be black in the 21st century. Is this still?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm a father myself of two, so I've got a son who's 6 years old, turned 6 a couple of weeks ago, and my daughter who's 8.5 years old. So I've been in the parenting game now for about 8 and a bit years. So I'd like to think I've got a little bit of experience, but I'm always learning something new on a day-to-day basis. When I'm not being media lead for Dope Black Dads, I'm actually a qualified solicitor, so I practice in local authority, so I'm actually working in the field of adult social care. So so that's kind of my experience. As you can tell, I have no experience whatsoever in terms of the energy sector, so I'm kind of here to try and give an outsider's perspective on all things diversity and inclusion. And what diversity for me, what that question, when somebody asks me that, is diversity is kind of looking around the room, looking around your organisations and saying, okay, who do we have here at the table? Who do we have at the top levels? Who do we have kind of in the middle management? Who do we have across the board? And is it reflective of the culture of the organisation that we're trying to promote? And also, is it a reflection of the wider society as well? Because I think one of the things we often hear is, DEI is a buzzword that's definitely been out for a few years, and I think there's been a lot of issues that have happened, especially in the last few years, which has kind of pulled all of that into question. So for me, it's about trying to reflect accurately, or as much as possible, the culture of your organisation, but also kind of the wider society as well. So thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to having more of a conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Gillian.
Yep, thank you. So I'm Gillian Noble. I'm the Managing Director for ScottishPower Renewables Offshore business for development and operations, and I'm also the ScottishPower lead for diversity and inclusion at a senior management level. So nowhere near as an exciting a journey as Umar's got there, but also I do know the importance of making sure you tell your children's age, just get a half in it somewhere, so I do know that. So I've been in the industry for 24 years, in the energy industry, and I haven't always been a minority within the roles that I've had. However, the further my career has progressed, the change in sector from a retail space to a renewable space, I most definitely have moved into being a minority in the space that I operate on a daily basis. So what does diversity mean to me? I'm reflecting, I think, and it's always important to reflect on your own experiences, because it's difficult to be an ambassador, to be a role leader within an organisation with, responsibilities out with your core responsibilities if you can't reflect on what people's experiences actually are. For me, diversity, you can't have it without inclusion. So you can have a diverse organisation because you've ticked all the boxes in terms of recruitment, and you've promoted in the right way, and you've targeted people to move through the organisation through retention strategies. But can you actually have diversity if you don't have inclusion? And inclusion needs the majority to come along and actually be part of that conversation. And I think personally that's what I've experienced, is you have to work exceptionally hard as a minority group to make sure that the majority group includes you in not just the conversation, the decision making, but the social aspects and the camaraderie and everything that you need when you're running the high pressured roles that a number of people in our industry are doing, that you need that support network around you, and it can be a lonely place as a minority. So try to bring my perspective to it. I've experienced some of what Monica said as a female coming through the energy industry, but I have listened to many experiences, and I think perhaps I might have been a luckier one. I hate using that word luckier. I think I might have been a luckier person, that I have in general been surrounded by supportive cultures, but I know that's not the experience of everybody, particularly as females working in an energy industry.
Thank you, Gillian. Alistair, you and I have sat on the Energy Leaders Coalition for a number of years, but you wear a number of hats. Do you want to just share a little bit about your career?
Yeah, sure. Okay, my name's Alistair Phillips-Davies. I'm probably best known currently for being the Chief Exec of SSE. We're one of the biggest, broadest energy companies based across the UK and Ireland. We'd be the biggest renewable generator. We're looking to invest probably 40 billion plus over the next decade in the energy transition, whether that be networks, renewables, storage, carbon capture, hydrogen, all sorts of things. So I've got the privilege of leading a very big organisation that's also growing rapidly at the moment, and hopefully also growing particularly on the female side. As part of the Energy Leaders Coalition, people very kindly asked me to be the chair for this year, and so I'm doing that, and there I've got a real responsibility, I think, for trying to bring some new and innovative thinking for how we in the energy sector can push forward the agenda of diversity and inclusion, and we particularly focus on the gender part of that, but obviously very, very bought into all different parts of that. I think for me, when I think about diversity, what does it mean for me? I go a lot to decision making and who you want in the room, how you get diverse experiences, how you get people who have a different perspective. Ultimately, there's a lot of work has been done, academic work has been done on how you need different angles. We're all unique people, some of us a bit more unique than others, and we bring our unique perspectives, but we also anchor things in particular ways, and individuals can have significant biases in their decision making, and therefore getting the different angles, the different considerations is hugely important in making decisions and going forward. And I think that diversity, there's long lists, whether it's social, ethnic, gender, all sorts of different diversities, sexual, disability. One of the things that I thought was quite gratifying a few years ago, one of our female board members who came in, although being in the industry we are in, about 70% of our staff still are male. She was kind enough to say at least she felt we had pretty good thought diversity around the room, and that's important. And I suppose finally I'll just go back to a comment that one of our previous chairs made around diversity, and he called it the 4 Ds. And he's even older and even more dinosaur-like than me, but this was Lord Smith, and he said greater diversity brings broader debate. It also leads to better decision making, and ultimately that leads to business delivery. And whether that delivery is for pounds, pence and shilling, for the old ones in the room on the bottom line, or around people and hiring, or around how we treat and deal with customers, all of those things are super, super important. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And then Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah Beattie. I work for WPC Energy. We were formerly the World Petroleum Council. We're one of the largest global associations in the energy sector. And we're sitting here today because we run a diversity survey with BCG, which I'll talk about in time. I've worked in energy since 1998. I had stints at Shell in London and Shell in Damascus. I can remember the early days with some really terrible comments. I once invited a friend, I got a friend a job as a PA in one company who I won't mention, and when she went up to the floor, it was all male, and she said to the person that was, she had recruited her, am I the only female on this floor? And the answer was yes, there's only one support role on this floor. So equating female with support role, and that was not that long ago. Diversity to me just means richness of ideas and perspectives. I was doing my homework with my 11-year-old son last night, his homework, sorry, not my homework, talking about the Panama Canal and how it worked. And it was such an interesting thing to look at, because basically, I don't know if anyone knows, but lots of different people and different engineers came in to try and build that canal in the late 19th century, and the Colombians, the French, whatever. No, but they didn't work together. They all worked in silos. The French tried to dig the canal, and they lost 22,000 people in the process and lots of money, and they gave up. And then the technical guys from, I think, the US had a completely different perspective. They were like, we're not going to dig it. We're going to flood it with water, create a dam, and then create locks where the boats can go up and then down. And I was just thinking, and I said to my son, wouldn't it have been great if all those different nationalities had been sat at the table at the beginning of that project? Because I think the outcomes would have been much better. And for me, that's what diversity is about.
Yeah. And it's interesting when we talk about diversity of thought, actually, we're talking about diversity in terms of representation, and the diversity of thought that comes as a product of that is really valuable. So, right, Sarah, we'll kick off with you in the first couple of questions. So, you mentioned the BCG work that you've been doing and the Untapped Reserves report, which looks at diversity and equity and inclusion. Why do you believe it's so important that we gather data? And also tell us a little bit about the energy sector and the data that you've got reported.
Yeah, so we've been tracking diversity within the global energy sector with BCG since 2017. I think it gives a really accurate picture to the industry of where we are. So that's really important, and it also highlights the areas of inequalities and the areas that we need to focus on. Our latest survey was released in September 2023, and it says that female representation in the global energy sector is at 23%, which is a rather sobering figure. And I think tracking the data creates an urgency and a sort of a momentum and puts a pressure on the industry. It holds the industry accountable to do something, because this is a really big problem. We all know, everyone in this room knows the value of diversity. The survey also tracks the same data every 3 years, so then we can look at where improvements are made and also what interventions have been effective. So it's just a really useful tool to show kind of the state of the nation within the sector.
And from that, it really sounds like we're not making progress as quickly as perhaps other sectors. And why do you think that's the case?
So, to give you some comparison, we are the second worst performing sector globally. So, only 23% of female representation. Only construction is lower than us at 14%. And agriculture has actually frog-marched over us in recent years, so they're 25%. And you look at sectors such as finance, they're near parity, they're 48%. So it is quite a sobering picture, and there is a lot of work to be done within our sector. So We believe that historically it's been a very male-dominated sector, and particularly with field and technical roles. We believe that there are fewer women, well, we know there are fewer women in leadership, and the last session with Professor Jürgen said, you can't be what you can't see. So women don't see role models within the industry, so they don't really feel inclined to come and work in this industry because they don't see how they themselves could be successful. There's a problem with STEM education and girls. It varies across the globe, so regionally the figures are very different. But if you look in the UK, for example, I think 57% of graduates, BA or BSc graduates are female, but only 39% have STEM degrees. So again, there's fewer women coming through the pipeline. And finally, there's a piece around, we're a very international organisation, and often advancement is linked to relocation. And we all know that women disproportionately shoulder family responsibilities. There's a UN study that says, I think, that women do 2.5 times the amount of unpaid care work that men do. So again, often women aren't in a position to just drop everything and relocate, and that can hinder their career advancement. And then women don't want to come into our sector because of that.
Yeah, I can certainly resonate with some of that. And when you're thinking about particularly the representation in oil and gas, I mean, it shows a slight upward trend from the data that's reported, except in operations and technical support roles at the executive level. So what do we need to do there about, you can't be what you can't see? What do we need to do there to really address that?
So again, that's kind of linked to sort of graduates and the pipeline of people coming within our sector. So our survey looked at 71 global companies, and it specifically focused on the companies that were performing the best in DEI, and we looked at what they're doing. And there were sort of three things that became very apparent. The first one was visible and committed senior leadership. So tracking, setting targets, tracking targets with D&I, linking to compensations. And there's a statistic that says middle-level management are 2 to 3 times more likely to see D&I as a priority within their own teams if they can see visible commitment from the top. So that was one of the key findings from those very successful companies. Secondly, a kind of strategic operating model that supports diversity. So that means bias-free recruitment, retention, advancement, and also at certain points of the employee life cycle, specific interventions as well. And thirdly, policies, sort of foundational policies and programs that support diversity. So whether that's as simple as equal pay or paternity leave, or even more recently we've seen with COVID is sort of flexible, hybrid and remote working. And we found that particularly flexible working is such a tool in creating a more, or potentially could be a great tool in creating a more sort of diverse workforce. Again, around all the issues of care work and outside of work responsibilities. But one of the things which would be our call to the industry is that 57% of the companies that we spoke to said that post-COVID they were going to start rolling back the flexibility in their companies, and we're saying, if you're really committed to diversity, this is a disaster, so please don't do that.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to come on to Alistair next and talk a little bit about the Energy Leaders Coalition, and I think, Gillian, you referenced about how we engage the majority, and actually that's the theme that Powerful Women have been working on the Energy Leaders Coalition with as this year's topic. So, Alistair, talk a little bit about how we do that.
Okay, so I think for us, greater diversity is what we need to do to bring the energy transition around. I think pretty much every company wants to participate in the energy transition, even if there are discussions about how much oil and gas there should be and how long it should last. It's definitely a transition, and we're working on that, and we've got years to do it. I think in terms of bringing people in, it's clear, as we've already heard, 23% of people within the sector are female. In my company, we're about 30%. I'm pleased to say that at a senior level, we've gone from around 30%, where we did touch 39% recently, but I know going forward with a couple of defections recently, we'll be back to about 37.5% at Exco and one below. So it is how we get those people into senior roles, how we engage with them. That piece about, I suppose, thought leadership, how we become particularly visible is really, really important to people. If I turn up, I'm obviously slightly male, slightly pale, slightly stale, and all those sort of things. So how do I actually turn up and try and engage with people in a way that gets females and ethnic minorities and all sorts of different, disabled people to want to come and work with us? And that's important. You can do that through I&D departments and whatever, but what you need to do is get leadership from everybody in the company up and down the organisation to try and do that. So I think we've got more role models now, so I think when you are getting towards 40%, you've got a lot more role models in all sorts of positions, and we had 3 people around the Exco, all females. Close to 50% of our board are females. I think that's all important. And I think for us, it's about when you need risk management, when you need creativity, when you need innovation, you need all those things. You need that broader debate that those different people have, and whether they've come from a public school environment, a private school environment. If I think about people around my table, or people who grew up in council estates and were relatively deprived, you need all of those different people in the room in order to move things forward. I think as CEOs, I suspect most of us are looking for a growth mindset. We're looking for an always learning rather than always knowing culture. And therefore getting people really engaged in that is hugely important. And I think part of that, forcing yourself outside of your comfort zone, wanting to see what can be different, is really, really important in trying to engage minorities, because rather than being comfortable with groupthink and with just familiarity, forcing yourself outside that, I think is absolutely critical in terms of trying to engage those minorities, forcing yourself to try and see things from a different perspective and bring them into the room.
And through that vehicle of the ELC and having that conversation and bringing those essentially very senior decision makers together to influence it, talk a little bit, Alistair, about the ROI on diversity and how we make the case for the sector so that people in positions of power like yourself actually take tangible actions.
Yeah, and I suppose the very, very specific one that we did is going back a few years now, way back in 2017. We launched a programme to look at the return on investment when we were investing in diversity and inclusion. And there was one of the great consultancies, unfortunately it wasn't BCG in this case, but one of the consultancies, they had a methodology. We came up with a number of about £4.50 at that time. So we were thinking, well, crikey, this is definitely worth doing at £4.50. But we put in place a programme at that time. It was a 3-4 year programme where what we wanted to do was significantly improve our inclusive processes, policies, practices, the foundations of what we were doing. We did that. We measured the same thing 4 years later. That was in 2021. So inflation hadn't kicked in to this extent, and we'd far more than doubled it. So we've gone from £4.50 to about £11 in terms of that same measurement on the same basis. And I think there's a variety of things that we did, whether it's inclusive hiring, training for all of our managers who were hiring anybody within the organisation. Well, it's more actively listening to employees. We've set up belonging groups within SSE, whether that be LGBTQ plus or even armed forces. There's quite a lot of armed forces people work there, and they wanted their own belonging group. Giving people a voice is important. We ran things like reverse mentoring, I'm sure people do. On maternity, paternity and adoption leave, we significantly improved increased what we did there. A young lady who worked in sort of near the corporate office, who's now the FD's secretary, a year or so ago, she was coming back from maternity leave, but she benefited from a programme. If you're willing to work 3 or 4 days a week, we'll pay you 4 or 5 days a week, basically. So they can ease themselves back in, and they're getting rather more money. So they're not feeling like they're being forced back into work early just to try and make ends meet. A lot of things done there. And then finally, for us on STEM, because you mentioned STEM, lots of people have different programs here, and I'm sure they're all very good and worthy, and we get asked to join lots of them. We do a lot of work with Teach First, who look at particularly underprivileged people, and it's all around people, trying to get people into education, trying to help teachers who are finding maybe the more difficult people to reach in terms of education, who are going to suffer a bit because of their circumstances, try and give them better STEM training. Because we've done that for a long time, we see some of those people coming through, whether it's technical colleges, whether it's out of A-levels, or indeed through degrees, then coming back to us or other companies within our sector because they've been excited by what they see. And I think all that's important. And then finally, for me, at board level, I've certainly seen as we've migrated over probably a decade, if I go back a decade to when I became CEO, there were not as many females around the table then. If I think back, there were 2. That I can think of, whereas now we've got 5 or 6 around the table, 5 actually, around the table. So it's a significant improvement, and I do think the quality of debates we get and the different things that we bring into the room are better. And look, we have challenging but also very useful conversations about a lot of the big decisions that we're making.
Thank you. And one final question just around your ELC chairship and your hopes for the next 12 months. What does that look like? Where do you hope that the industry will be in 12 months' time under your influence?
I'm sure I won't influence the entire industry. There's a few energy companies in the room. I suspect Gillian and Murray aren't going to be listening to me too hard, but maybe some of the people in the room who are dealing with these issues will. Look, I think collectively we need to find a way to engage diversity of thinking for those who aren't engaged in it. So how do we show and demonstrate that this is the right thing to do? We need to find ways to bring alive what I truly believe about that diversity of thought and therefore that diversity of experience and people in all sorts of ways, and how that is just good for business up and down the industry. So I'm definitely going to try and bring that forward. I like to be a little bit humourful at times. Hopefully we'll enjoy the sessions that we've got. We've had one session to date. We had a lady, a behavioural scientist, Nuala Walsh, who was excellent. Full of energy for a start. A lot of challenge to us too. Talked a lot about biases and on decision making and things like that. And that's what a lot of boards are doing. They're either making decisions or they're challenging decisions. And she particularly measured one thing that I think struck me was on familiarity bias, which is a huge area. You just go with what you're familiar with. You go with people you're familiar with, and that is a massive enemy of what we're trying to deal with at the moment. And then finally, I'll just mention it because there was a significant event yesterday in March. We're going to hear from the FTSE Women's Leaders Chief Executive, Denise Wilson. She obviously launched the report yesterday. I think there's some pleasing things in that. Progress on percentage of females on ExCos +1 and plus direct reports had increased in both the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 250. There were disappointments there in terms of the appointment rates. We're down a little bit when I look through it. I wasn't at the event, so I'll probably have to look a little bit harder before I get together, and I'll get challenged by a few people in the room who sit around the board with me. But I think there are positives to take out of it, and there are negatives as well, which we need to go and address. So for me, it's around trying to collectively move forward the set of people that I'm very fortunate to have around the table, and to get them to move their businesses forward, because I think we all want to go in the right direction. We want to get that 23% up, particularly for a big thing for us, hitting 40% of ExCo +1 by 2025 is a big target that we've got in terms of female representation. We're kind of within snatching distance, but we haven't quite got there yet, so plenty to be done.
Very good, thank you. Right, Gillian, coming on to you now to talk about ScottishPower a little bit. So in 2023, you strengthened the diversity of the team through the biggest ever recruitment drive and put DEI high on the agenda for the leadership team, and launched the Executive D&I Committee. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yep, so maybe just start with, which leads in a journey here. So you mentioned a campaign, a recruitment drive. We were bringing in 1,000 jobs, 1,000 green jobs to our organisation in the UK, and that in itself is a gift. So you can talk about the targets that Alistair's mentioned, that I can mention here as well, and we can talk our targets. It's very, very difficult to turn a ship without recruitment, because your retention practices, your forward planning of talent into key roles will take time over a period of time. Therefore, nothing better than a recruitment drive to make sure that you're getting a chance to try and influence as best you can how you can increase the diversity within your organisation. I know we're here to talk a lot about female diversity, but so many other aspects of diversity into our organisation. So as part of that drive, and whilst it landed at the same time, it wasn't planned in such a way. We didn't launch a D&I committee because we were recruiting 1,000 new jobs. The launch of the D&I committee had been through periods of work, so periods of through many years of probably individuals at certain parts of the organisation taking it as part of their responsibility to drive through, and then encouraging people in our organisation to start forming employee networks. But where were the employee networks getting their voice outside of the hard work that they were doing personally and the personal investment of time? And therefore there had to be a more governed platform. So when I was asked to chair the D&I committee for ScottishPower, my first reaction, and I don't mind sharing it, was, well, this is a bit token, is it not? Ask a female that's in a fairly senior level of the organisation to chair the D&I committee, so that when the picture opportunities come up, you've got the right message there, and you know, people think that you're really trying hard. And I think I was doing the organisation a bit of disjustice there, right? So I'm more making the point. So for us, that D&I committee, and when I was asked to chair it, and I reflected back and I thought, why are they asking me to do this? Because I've got a sphere of influence, I've got a voice, and therefore use the voice to make sure that it's not just people ploughing away further down our organisation to make senior management listen to the benefits of what we can get from diversity and inclusion in our organisation. And again, that makes it sound like senior management are just doing what they're told and saying the right things. Absolutely not. What we were seeing in our business was, if we are going to move our business to the next stage of what we need to achieve, you know, in this organisation, as we move through our net zero journey, same way that many others are moving as well, we need to fill our organisation with new ideas, new approaches, new experiences. And typically within an energy industry, people will come through their career, like me, as a graduate, into a role, and you just naturally move your way through a career. So actually bringing diversity in, you know, through the journey at different levels of the organisation is not something that that many energy organisations do. So we had to do that because we had no choice. We had to bring in different skill sets, and therefore really important. But as part of that sphere of voice for me, for that committee lead, was I want diversity and inclusion to be seen as the same threat to our business as cyber security, as data protection. Why is that getting discussed at board level, and the fines that there's fines, etc. we can have, but ultimately 1,000 new jobs are being brought in at a very heavy expense. We need to make sure that we nurture those roles through the organisation to ultimately help achieve the bottom line targets that we have. Therefore, there has to be a way to make sure that we are doing that correctly. So our D&I committee is a governance committee. It's making sure that there's a voice challenging where we're putting our priorities, giving targeted actions, not just a talking shop. And that was one of the things that was really important to me when I was asked to select who within the organisation I'd like to join me on that committee. And I was given a list, and I won't lie, I was given a list of people very senior in our organisation, and I was given explanations why they were being put forward. Maybe they had a really strong interest in diversity and inclusion. All of that is great, but I needed people who could take targeted action because they had large operational responsibilities. The recruitment was happening in their area, the new roles were coming through in their division, and therefore enforcing them to think about how they were recruiting and not just how quickly we were recruiting. I think that was a really key part for us, and you know, that was really why the Exec D&I committee was brought about, was to govern the priority of our actions and make sure that our actions were targeted and were having impact.
And in terms of, I'll ask you the same question as Alistair around your chairship. What do you hope to achieve in the next 12 months with your committee?
Yeah, so maybe just mention, because I haven't mentioned figures here, so we actually have achieved something in the last year. And sometimes when you give these numbers away, you think, well, people are going to be underwhelmed. But when you actually break down what has to happen, what's the ins and the outs that have happened here? We're in large organisations. We'll have efficiency programmes where people will leave the organisation, and that can be weighted in such a way of where they're leaving. It might be more female represented. Or likewise, you can have an opportunity where there's more female representation as well. So the figures are never as black and white as they suggest, but in terms of female representation within our senior leadership population, and I know every organisation will define this slightly different, we've moved from 33% to 34% in 2023. So we've moved a full percent, and I can hear you go, wow. But actually, when you look proportionately within that group, we grew that group as well by 10%. But we grew our female population in that group by 10%, and we grew our female population by 12%. So proportionately, we were challenging ourselves. We were making sure that we were asking the questions as we were going through internal promotions, as we were going through succession planning, as we were going through the recruitment. We were stopping and asking at stages in that process, are we driving what we want? And asking the question should just make senior leaders or our management teams beneath us stop and think. We are not trying to influence who's the best person into the job. We're making sure that you've kept an open mind as you go through the stages and down through the funnel of what you're doing at that point. So, yeah, that was, for me, we've achieved a lot in 2023. What do we need in 2024? And it goes back to something that Sarah said, we need data. We need better data in our organisations. Something as simple as the encouragement of our employee base to provide their data to us so that we can understand, very straightforward in most instances, to understand male-female. It's not straightforward to understand how you're achieving other diverse employee networks within your business as well. So data is going to be key for us, and we need the help of everybody in our organisation to provide that. And then, you know, something that's really amazed me as a statistic, and this is where the D&I committee really came into play. So we've got people that is their role within the organisation, to be looking at recruitment, to be focusing on the best practices in D&I and bringing it to us as a table in terms of how we prioritise the actions. One of the things that came to me when we were looking at what's our succession plans and looking at the targets we have for 2025 and 2030 and how are we travelling in that journey to it. And it was really just through a conversation. I was, well, okay, so how many females do we need if we've to achieve that target by 2030? How many females do we need in our pipeline to be achieving the senior target? So we went through the ranks here. We went through to be achieving your exec team, to be achieving your senior population as we define it, and to be achieving what we defined as responsible roles. We needed an extra over 130 females in the population of funnel. That was quite a stark position. Well, where are we getting them from? Who's communicating this message? How are we making sure when our teams are doing succession plans that they're thinking of this and the gap that is created for us? So data is going to be key to making the right priority decisions for the best practices to give our organisation what we need for success moving forward.
I wonder how many organisations have done that exercise and actually mapping out how many women are needed in order to actually achieve the targets that they're committing to. So, Umar, I'm going to come to you next, and then we're going to open up to the floor. So, just on the familiarity bias point that was raised, and I think around perhaps some of the unhelpful language that we often hear, and it's something that I know that is very close to your own heart around toxic masculinity, for example, and making language really relatable and inclusive, and why language is important. But perhaps you can share some reflections on that.
Yeah, I think the use of language is very, very important in terms of how we kind of communicate what we're trying to achieve here, because ultimately I think what we've seen in the last few years has been a bit of a trend in terms of certain phrases have come out, they're being used repeatedly, kind of out there on social media, they're out there, on the news, etc., being used in the community, and they've kind of been weaponized to the point now where, in some respects, they've kind of lost their meaning. And actually, I suppose we're living in an era of a bit of a cancel culture, so people now are looking for a reason to try and stop somebody from actually having a voice, which is quite problematic, because then what we're doing is we're creating a situation where we're not fostering debate anymore, and we're kind of shutting debate down at the first instance. And I think for me, that is a big problem. I mean, as a lawyer, I love to debate. I'm married to another lawyer, so you can imagine what our household is like in terms of debating. And I think it's rubbed off on the children as well, because they like to have those kind of challenging conversations as well. But I think in all seriousness, I think when we're hearing phrases like toxic masculinity, what does that actually mean in practice? What does that actually mean when we're talking about toxic masculinity? And it was a conversation I was having in a group of mine the other day, in terms of how that word has now been used and kind of trying to define men in a particular way. Even the term woke, we know how that went from meaning one thing about 4 or 5 years ago now to kind of being used as a way to shut down debate. So I think language is extremely important in terms of how we use it. And I think, within organisations, within the community, we have to be very, very careful about how we are using it, and making sure that we're using it in the right way. If we're using a definition, making sure it's correct, and not just saying something is woke for the sake of saying it because you don't want to have that debate with somebody. So I'm all for having debates, and I think we are very quick these days to shut people down, but I think we need to kind of really try and take the sting out of it a little bit and have those conversations and kind of not be afraid to challenge each other, because otherwise change is never going to happen if we're just shutting things down at the first instance because we're afraid to say, okay, you know what, they think I'm going to be, as a chief exec, I'm seen to be toxic and toxic masculinity because I'm a male, I'm in a position of power, so therefore anything that I say is going to be looked at in those veins. Then you're never really going to have a proper debate and conversation, and things aren't really going to change, and you're just going to create situations where people continue to just move in the same way that they have been, i.e. I'm just going to, in terms of succession, etc., I'm just going to have people that that kind of aligned with what I'm saying because it's just easier that way. We're not going to have any issues versus somebody who's actually willing to challenge and push back.
And there is a bit of a fear of people saying the wrong thing because they don't know, and actually having that conversation and education is a really big part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's key to, having those uncomfortable conversations is key. I've said this so many times, and again, speaking from a legal perspective, because I think very often, people are afraid to have those kind of conversations, and I'm like, well, if you want your organisation to grow, if you want your organisation to change, unfortunately, the first step is we're going to have those uncomfortable conversations. Why aren't there enough black people at senior level? Why are there not enough women at senior level? Why are there not enough people from LGBTQ plus community at those levels? Let's start the conversation from there, because I think if we're just going to skirt around the issue, then things are never going to change, and we're just kind of parking it to one side in the hope that actually if we say, great, we've got our posters up because I know we're still in LGBTQ plus month now, and in Black History Month in October. Great, let's get all the black people out. Be the spokespeople. I've seen it happen time and time again. For me, I'm a black man. It's Black History Month. It's Black History Day every day for me. 365 days of the year. It's not just something that happens in February in the US or in October in the UK. So it's kind of like, let's have those conversations. Let's be real with each other, because that's the only way we're going to be able to push forward and make change in our organisations.
Lots and lots of nodding to that point. So, right, one more question, then I do want to come to the audience. So, just around vocalising the benefits of diversity and inclusion for men, particularly, and not just minority groups, and ensuring that they become allies. We talk a lot about allyship and the role and the importance of it, but specifically in getting on board with diversity initiatives. How do you think companies can successfully achieve that?
Again, I think it goes back to the point I was making before in terms of you have to have those conversations, and I think it's about breaking it down and kind of trying to have that level of understanding of, okay, where are these things come from? Now, I grew up in East London, I grew up in Stratford, I know what poverty looks like. I saw it on a daily basis. When I became a lawyer, it was very different. I don't work in kind of the commercial side of it, but I know the problems that people have had in terms of trying to get into that side. But why? Because the face doesn't fit. So it's kind of a very much an old boys network type of thing. oh yeah, my dad was a judge, or my dad is a partner in this firm, I'll get you in. Whereas me, I'm just applying to all these places, and they see my name on the CV, and it's like, sorry mate, we're not here for this. So, but then you find, and I've had this happen to me many a time where I've been in court, and I'm up against somebody who's a partner in a law firm, and I'm just like, how are you in the position that you're in? Oh, well, yeah, it's pretty obvious because of how you look, but I'm probably more talented than you are, but I will often get overlooked because people don't want to have that kind of conversation. And again, I think it's more pertinent with men than it is with women, because I think for men generally, whether you're black, white, Asian, whatever, there is a bit of that pack mentality in some respects. You want to kind of, you feel more comfortable having people that look like you or sound like you. But I think it's about us kind of having those conversations. And one of the things that we do with Dope Black Dads is kind of on a Saturday in a month, we have like a group at Soho House that will come together, and it's quite a diverse group. And the thing is, what's really interesting is seeing how white men, black men, Asian men, we're kind of having those conversations, and we're challenging each other on our own perceptions, because there are things that as a black man, I have certain views on, and that's based on my lived experience. There are certain things that white men have, and that's based on their lived experience. But it's about, how do we challenge that, break that down? Because I think when we're having those conversations, when we're challenging each other and breaking it down and having that better understanding, that will translate a lot better into the workplace, because then you come out there from that perspective of, okay, I get it now. I understand some of the challenges. I may not have lived through what they've gone through, but I understand, and that will kind of affect my way of thinking. And again, that will affect further as well in terms of how women are perceived within the workplace as well, because I think if you're having those conversations, it's like, it's not just about how it affects ethnic minorities, but also how does that impact the women that you're working with, and kind of challenging those notions. And I think it's just about conversation starting and challenging each other, really.
And lots of reference to that representation piece around making sure that you have all the right conversations, all the right people in the room to have that conversation. Right, we'll come out to the floor now. So if you do have a question, pop your hands up, and Georgina or Grace will bring you a microphone.
Hi there. I have a question surrounding maternity in the UK, and it's I'll take you through a scenario which happened recently. So I've got an older sister. She's done extremely well, got herself into a very high power position within her firm, and she had a child recently, and with that, the firm offered very agreeable kind of maternity terms, as much time as you'd like. However, she returned to work and found that she had been kind of kept out a lot of the things, that it was, won't go through it all, but overall it's a very difficult return for her, particularly because it's a client-facing role. Now, she's didn't take it lying down, and she's actually rewriting the entire policy for the firm now on that. But my question is, particularly in quite a male-dominated industry, what work needs to be done to ensure that things like this, because I imagine this is not a unique situation, that things like this don't happen in future, particularly in roles which involve a lot of client interaction? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually the point around women having lots of career interruptions through their lives, whether it be having to go and take care of children, maternity leave, or even more latterly when they get to other challenges around menopause, it's how we create that flexibility, isn't it? Does any of the panellists want to take the question?
I'm happy to go first of all. I'm sure that's the case. I remember, probably it's a few years ago, maybe several years ago, pre-COVID, having a number of conversations with professional services firms, so particularly the accountancy firms and things like that, where getting to partner, often that was at a critical time when females were going off on leave. And so just at the critical moment when they were making that very, very big move, because they're moving to partner in a lot of the, and I don't know so much in lawyers, but it's probably true there, but a lot of the other professional services firms, a lot of people were becoming pregnant late 20s and early 30s. And when people are going through those things like numbers, so if you're targeting, trying to get up to 40 or 50% partner levels in these places, you suddenly needed 80% of your intakes to be coming females in order to get them there. So I don't know exactly how they did all those things, but I know a few of the senior partners who've done a lot to actually push that forward, and so I think certainly some of the more enlightened senior partners that I talked to were very aware of the issue, and also you would get things where I think they would see issues that we see in our business where you'll get fantastic females who don't tend to speak up. You know, there'll be a couple of alpha males in the room who'll dominate every conversation, and you need to somehow cut through that and deal with it. With us, I suppose on that felt leadership piece, there was a lady with us who was number 2 in IT in Ireland, and she'd gone off on maternity leave. And while she was on maternity leave, her boss left, and when she came back, we promoted her to be head of IT. And we happened to win an award at that time in Ireland for the best returner sort of experience in Ireland. But I think sent a real message to the organisation. Now, we were fortunate to have somebody with the talent of Claire, who and she just happened to do that at that time. She subsequently had another child, and she's gone on from being the head of IT. She actually leads our entire business in Ireland now. And so I think you've just got to sometimes, particularly where people have other issues, I feel you've got to say, look, guys, if they haven't gone off and done a lot of paternity leave, which many people do now actually, so we've got a quality of that in a lot of organisations, you've got to blow through the fact that they may not be quite as experienced, and you've got to decide how much runway they've got and where they can actually get to, rather than maybe where they are at that particular point in time. And we've tried to do that. I'm sure we've made mistakes in that case, but we've tried to do that, and we've got some great examples within the organisation of having done that for people. I think it's just like, okay, probably a number of people in this room can't look at me and say, oh, that could be Alistair because I look very different to you. But if you can see that we're trying to make a difference and put people, diverse people into senior leadership roles, and we're actually blowing through issues like maternity, I think that can really help. And obviously, feel very sorry for your sister.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're on, you go, Sarah.
I was going to say, our survey found that sometimes, I'm not saying this is the case with your sister, but unintentionally, male managers would not offer promotion to women that had had children. And what they would say is, she's just had a baby, it's going to be too much for her. And the intention wasn't a negative intention. The role is very difficult, it's very involved. And the message is very much, that's not your decision to make. You basically, that person, you offer that role as you would to anyone else, and that person then goes and discusses childcare, discusses how, if it is feasible for them, if it would work for them as a family. So that was something that came up with our survey.
Just one sentence on that. What you've got to do is figure out how you're going to support that person to go into that role. Mm-hmm. Even if it is challenging, how you're going to get them support, how you're going to give them the time, how you're going to give them the flexibility. If that's what you want, and you believe that person's capable of doing it, that's what you need to do.
Because you can write all the best policies in the world, but actually it's everything around it.
Yeah, I was maybe going to say that as well, is that you shouldn't, your sister shouldn't be relying on luck that you've got the right manager, luck that you've got the right person that asks the right questions. I've had 2 promotions during maternity leave, so on one hand you could say I was lucky, or on the other hand you could say the organisation seriously thinks about this and has it running through its culture that even if someone isn't displaying the best behaviours or giving the right consideration to somebody that's on maternity leave, that there are other lines of defence within that organisation. And I don't mean compliance teams, I mean colleagues, peers, who stop someone in their track and ask the question. I've seen a situation whereby, and again, to your point, it wasn't intentional. I could guarantee it was. I knew it wasn't intentional, but the conversation was, someone was in maternity leave, someone was covering their role, the person that was covering their role was doing really, really well. And it was nearly like someone had forgot the person that left had done really, really well as well. And there was nearly this consideration of, well, when that person come back, we could keep this other person where they are right now and give another opportunity to the individual that's coming back from maternity leave. And when I said, I kind of stopped the conversation, but again, I had the confidence to do that. Other people in the room might not have. When I stopped the conversation and explained what that's that was sounding like, what
like.
that would feel like to that individual. That's not to say you couldn't have had a conversation with that individual and said, what do you want to do when you come back to work? What would you like to do? Do you want reduced hours? Do you want to come back and have the same aspiration as you had before you? It's about talking and understanding as well. But the fact that your sister had to rewrite a policy will be helping to protect, but it's not the policy it will protect. There will be a lesson learned in that organisation. I don't know the size of the organisation she was in, but there will be a lesson learned. The fact that she has had to rewrite a policy to address what happened to her, that will stick with people, and people will be more cautious and they'll be more thoughtful to what they need to do. So I think there's a mixture of have the right policies, but then let the right culture come from them as well. I don't think any of us have the right answer here, but it's an interesting one.
Probably got time for one more quick question. Georgina?
Thanks, Georgina. Hi, I'm Neil McGuinness from BP. We talk about having the uncomfortable conversations, and I'd really like the view of the panel on why we never talk about trans and non-binary people in this setting, please.
I think I'll take that. I'm not in this sector, but I think certainly something that has come up in law, and I think part of it is because it's still, I think for a lot of people, it's still the great unknown. I think as a society, people are still trying to navigate that particular topic, because I think back in the day it was about the issue to do with obviously the LGBT community. So I think people having difficulties with kind of having those conversations and trying to navigate that. And now we're in a situation where we're talking about the trans community, and it's like, well, how do we have this conversation? And again, I think what is not helping is, and again I'll be critical here of government, but I think when you're seeing politicians kind of using it as a bit of a football and weaponizing it, and people are kind of having these conversations, well, if the Prime Minister has this particular view, or if this MP or the Secretary of State has this view, then it's okay to kind of think like that. So it's kind of, that's clouding the judgment at the moment. So people are not thinking or feeling like, actually, we can have these conversations, or how does that look like? So, and again, I think in the same way where we've talked about in the past, with everything that happened, like Black Lives Matter, for example, was kind of, that suddenly was like, okay, right, black people, hello, how are you? Sorry, we've been mistreating you for the last, however many years. What can we do? And nobody really knew how to navigate that. So now we've got, trans community is saying, well, we're not being listened to. Nobody understands what our needs are. So everyone's just like, okay, well, how do we navigate this? So I think it's more to do with people not feeling comfortable enough to have the conversation, as opposed to not necessarily not saying that we don't want to have the conversation. It's like, well, how do we navigate that? So I think that's where we have to have those kind of challenging conversations again. And I'm very much for having challenging conversations, because I think if we don't open it up in our organisations and in the community, how are we ever going to expect to kind of move forward? And I think it's about creating safe spaces as well for people to have those conversations. And as I said, it doesn't help when down the road in Westminster you've got politicians using it as a bit of a football, as a weapon, as a vote getter or not. So but within our organisations, within the community, I think we've got a responsibility to try and change that narrative. And even if they don't know how to behave in Westminster, the rest of us do. So we should do that.
Two very quick observations on that, not necessarily energy related. One is, I sit on a multi-academy trust board, and within education we are having conversations about it, because it is coming into schools, and it is a conversation we need to have in order to safeguard and protect children and have that very live dialogue. But there aren't very many lived experiences for us to call upon from the board and relate to. So we're having to go externally to get information and understand it better, so that we can make better decisions. And I think that's a curiousness that needs to come, and it's marginalised groups, but you have to try and seek that information elsewhere if you don't have it within that representation of the group that's discussing. And secondly, an event I was at, not this network but a different network, and it was a female network, and there was somebody who actually articulated that they felt uncomfortable. They were trans, they were transitioning, they felt uncomfortable in that situation. So they didn't feel like they belonged either in any camp. And that's something that we need to get really comfortable with, you know, from Powerful Women's perspective, actually. What does that mean for women who have transitioned? Are we welcoming them? What does that look like for them? How do we support them with their careers as well? So there are many more questions that we can talk about there. I want to take your question because I'm conscious that we can't leave one unanswered.
As you said before, that for a woman to get a certain level or a certain promotion, we need to always to work harder than men. This is a fact, maybe in all communities. But I noticed that when you are dealing with the other genders, it's always easy to write an email or write a memo. The response will be great. But in meetings, it's always very difficult to navigate because if you get passionate about a subject or about any of the discussed issues, when a man is passionate, he's passionate, he will be praised. But when a woman is passionate about a certain issue, it's always, she's aggressive. And names will be called. She's a witch. She's very, honestly, it's always the same. And even from female workers, it's not only male workers. And in perspective, let's say in policies and regulations, we are equal. But in the meeting room, we are never equal. You speak your mind, nobody will listen. And maybe 5-10 minutes ago, a colleague will speak the same idea, the same suggestion you gave, and wow, he's praised, and wow, what a good suggestion. Excuse me? I just said it 10 minutes ago, nobody listened. And at the beginning, I kept quiet, but later on, I will stop the meeting and say, excuse me, sir, I already said that 10 minutes ago, and I had no reaction from yourself. And then, what, really? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. So I don't know, is it, maybe for our community, we just started the equality between men and women. Also, the number of women in the oil sector in Kuwait, I'm from Kuwait, is very high. Let's say it's almost the same as men. But there's the feedback and meetings and face-to-face negotiations or meetings, it's always different. Is it just for us or it's for all females all around the world? I really want to know. And how to navigate that? Sorry, it was a long question.
One thought, and then I'll open to the panel. So certainly when I was leading a business, part of the reason we used affinity groups was not just to get women together to support, but actually to work through some of these challenges. So that bring an example of the dark underbelly of what you've seen and experienced, and how would you tackle it? And different people come at it from different angles. So like yourself, speaking confidently and being able to articulate in that meeting, saying to somebody, actually, don't speak over me, but for other people who might deal with situations differently, and so sharing some of those experiences so that we can, unfortunately, we do have to arm women with some of those tools to shift the cultures in some organisations until it becomes a point where everyone is treated equally and fairly. But certainly that's the way in which those networks were used within my organisation at that point. But Gillian,
the term ally springs to mind as well, because it's not all men that treat women like that in a meeting room. It's not. It's certain individuals, but likewise I've came across certain women that aren't very, accommodating in meeting rooms as well. So I think there is a real job, and that's why it's great when you see a mixed audience sitting here today, and we encourage that through our Connected Women's group as well, that we encourage, particularly at graduate levels coming in as well, join different networks, become allies to people that are minorities, because that's the only way you're going to get support through the rooms. This is not about what you describe. It feels a male-female thing. It's not a personality piece, it's a personality piece. People need called out when their behaviours are not suitable for the working environment that we are working in and trying to move forward in. Innovation, quick pace, agility, all these terms have no place for that type of behaviour, and I think the business environment will see that diminish, because you'll have a mix of everything coming into play here that you cannot allow the same behaviours to continue. So yeah, ally for me is key. You need allies for any minority group.
Absolutely.
that means we need to navigate beforehand. Now, what I'm doing, before I go into a meeting, I will go and speak to people, say, okay, I will be discussing this issue. I need your support in that. But why? Why do I need to do the extra effort? Why my male colleagues doesn't need to do that? That's the issue. We always need to act more, to put more effort in proving our points. And this is, to be honest, frustrating. That's not equality, not at all. When you need to put the extra effort, you are putting extra time into things that you can use it for other work aspects.
Because I hear what you're saying, because like for my wife, she's had a very similar experience. And as I say, she's a lawyer working in central government, so she's had a very similar experience to what you're saying. But I think the key, as has been said, is that having that allyship. And I get what you mean about, why should you have to put in that extra effort? I recognise that as well. As a black man, sometimes having to have those conversations outside the room with people can be a bit like, okay, I need to have an additional meeting to talk about this before I go into the meeting. But the key is that when you are dealing with those allies, they're the people that will help to elevate your voice in that meeting room. So when you feel like you're being shut down, those allies will be the ones to help step up. And the more that that's happening, the less there's going to be that need for you to have those meetings, because actually it becomes an accepted part of the culture, actually saying, you know what, your voice is just as valuable in this setting as everybody else's. So I hear what you're saying. These things, there is a frustration. You shouldn't feel like you need to make all of this extra effort. But, I do believe that making that little bit of effort now will have much better impact and much better return in the long term than not really.
And for the next generation coming through, that hopefully we can influence that change for them too. Okay, so we are going to close. I just want one very quick observation from each of you as we close in terms of takeouts. So for those people who are decision makers, influencers, Sarah?
Yeah, basically, please allow people to do their job in their own terms and let them do it flexibly and let them thrive in the role, because that will help diversity. That will be one of the biggest things you can do to create a diverse workforce.
Thank you, Alistair.
Yeah, I think wherever we are, whatever committees we're leading, whatever committees we're on at any point in time, I think we've got to reflect for ourselves and whoever's running that committee. Are we actually here, and are we actually doing things in the cause of diversity which is supporting the purpose, the mission, and ultimately strategy of the organisation? And I think that's something very, very, very key. And if people aren't, then that needs to be brought up.
Thank you. Gillian?
Treat diversity and inclusion with the same business urgency that you do for every other risk and opportunity that's presented to you. That would be it for me.
Thank you. And Umar, finally, words from you?
I would say three things: listen, reflect, and act. So listen to what your workforce is saying, take into account what's been said about the organisation, reflect on that, and then act on it. And don't do it in a tokenistic way. Actually, we've heard what you've had to say. This is what we're going to do, and this is the actions that we're going to take to make things better.
Thank you to our excellent panellists, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.